Hey everyone, me Kevin here with the latest video from Nancy Pelosi breaking down what's going on in the negotiations. She starts off by telling us what the two current remaining issues are, and let's get into the other details and add commentary as necessary as well, so we understand what's going on with stimulus. Keep in mind, you can still get 2 free stocks with Webull, link down below, and life insurance in as little as 5 minutes via the link down below. Both of those you can do yourself. You don't have to talk to anybody. Super easy to do. Links down below. And for now, let's get into what Nancy Pelosi has to say. She's going to start with the two current problems. All right. The two current problems are, number one.
Since you asked, one is state and local, and the other is liability. And right now, by the time I speak to the secretary at 3 o'clock, I think that we will have language countering what they have in the bill, because safety in the workplace for us is not an issue. It's not a provision in a bill. It is a value.
So a quick note, this is a conversation that Steve Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi are expected to have at 3 p.m. Eastern time. We'll get details about that usually a couple hours later, but what Nancy Pelosi is saying is going to happen in that call is she's going to provide updated language to Steve Mnuchin saying, look, we'll do the liability protections, we'll do the testing the way you guys want it, but we want the language like this, some sort of compromise. All right, let's keep going.
These families, many of them essential workers, go to work. If they don't even get unemployment insurance if they're concerned about going to work because they might catch the virus because the provisions haven't taken place. So again, safety in the workplace, very important. I'm hoping that we can come to terms on that. So those are the two bookends. In between, we have some differences. And of course, they don't want to do anything for elections. I'm very concerned about what they're doing on census. It's so unconstitutional.
Quick pause there. Notice how she said they don't want to do anything on elections. It's almost kind of like she swept that under the rug. Like, hey, we're going to focus on state and local, the testing plan here, and liability protections. But in terms of elections, we'll sweep that under the rug and forget about it. She kind of cast that aside. So maybe this is Nancy starting to compromise a little bit.
Again, we may have to live to fight another day on that. I don't know. They don't.
Here's another one. This is another one in a row here. So elections, she swept under the rug, and then she started talking about census, and she said we may have to live to fight another day, essentially a different day. Like we'll have the fight a different day. That's another thing that she's now sweeping under the rug. We'll deal with it later, fine. This is a sign that she's actually softening. I mean, compared to us listening to her last week, where she was basically yelling at Wolf Blitzer, this is very different.
They've said they have no movement on the census, which is in defiance of the Constitution of the United States, that every person in the country should be counted. The Supreme Court just ruled in favor of the president that he could stop counting people, but the Congress can change that. And that's what we hope to do.
Madam Speaker, I would love it if you'd want to negotiate this with me. You're not going to do that. I recognize that. But can you give me this sort of sense when it comes to that liability, one of the two bookends you described, is it binary? That to say, is it all or nothing, or can there be some wiggle room in between so that there's some language the Republicans could accept, but it goes farther than what the current law is?
Quick note, binary would be like, is it on or is it off? Like there's no in between.
Well, to understand that issue in this legislation, what Senator McConnell has in there is something that is not coronavirus-centric. It's for 4 years. It applies to all kinds of other things, and it's not to the point. So that language should easily be changed. You know, he's doing tort reform when we're trying to do safety in the workplace. Now, they have come to good language on OSHA, our safety provisions in the bill, but the overarching McConnell language negates the OSHA regulation. So we're...
Oh, that's actually a big movement, actually, because the Trump administration had, and the Republicans had nothing for worker protections or consumer protections. Nancy Pelosi's now sounding happy about that, but she's frustrated that Mitch McConnell has what are called tort clauses in there, which basically protect corporations in the event that they cause harm to somebody. That's the point of a lawsuit anyway, right? Tort lawsuit. Anyway, all that legal stuff doesn't matter. Bottom line, the Mitch McConnell verbiage is too pro-corporation. Nancy Pelosi's like, okay, cool. Now we got the worker protections, aka OSHA protections, but now what about the consumers? We got to have protections for the consumers as well.
Saying if you believe that it doesn't negate it, write that into the language. Nothing in this bill shall undermine the ability of OSHA. You know, that's a traditional thing that we do. So that's one place. Now, I do believe that that if someone is honoring the OSHA provisions, having good working standards, and the rest, that could be an admissible defense should someone bring a case against them. So I think that there is a balance that can be struck, but it isn't the McConnell language. But we'll have our language to them. We're working very hard to protect the workers, but also to be able to come to an agreement.
That's very helpful, actually. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Give us some sense at the end of the day, whenever that is, tonight or whenever it is, how will we learn whether we may have a deal or not? I mean, I don't want to be sacrilegious. It's not choosing a pope, but what's going to be the puff of smoke? Will you tell us? Will you announce to the world, yes, I think we may have a deal, or
Just a heads up, this guy is really good at asking questions. See, he is breaking Nancy Pelosi down with kindness. This is the kind of stuff that I teach in my real estate negotiation course, real estate investing course, where we include negotiations. This is very good Q&A here.
what the deal's off?
Well, the deal, let me just say, it isn't that this day was a day that we would have a deal. It was a day where we would have our terms on the table to be able to go to the next step. And again, but legislation takes a long time. You have to have every provision, you have to have the Congressional Budget Office score it, the Legislative Council to review it. So these things take time. It's not just sending you a note. It's legislation. And it's what I love to do. I'm a legislator. They're not necessarily legislators, so I'm trying to impress upon them, if we want to have this by Election Day, and I think we can, you have to engineer back from there to this week. Now, if we have our terms on the table, they may not be in agreement, but at least there's a decision to be made as to what's more important or less important in light of weighing the equities to have an agreement. And then in the next day or so,
Okay, let's pause that for a second. What she's saying is the deadline today is, can we have an agreement on the terms? Then once we have an agreement, okay, we're going to do this approximate amount. We're going to do this approximate verbiage, whatever. Once we have the approximate, that's what today is. Then we'll go through the formalities over the next couple weeks.
I'm not sure they're going to be ready with their appropriations language. I hope so, but so far it's a little bit behind, and for what we've heard from there. Now, I'm an appropriator, and I think left to their own devices, the appropriators, Democrats and Republicans working together, can bring us to agreement. I think the Secretary believes that. I'm hoping that they are left to their own devices. And so, again, as I say to everyone, you're not going to love everything in here. It's a negotiation.
Right. It's legislation, exactly. Let's do exactly what you said. Let's go forward to Election Day and back time it, as we'd say in the broadcasting business. What do we have to do between here and there to get there? Assuming that you do have the basic terms you've worked out and you work on, when do you have to have the language of a bill? When do you have to call back your members for a vote? What does the next week or 10 days look like?
Well, of course, the final piece is the president signing the legislation. And for that to happen, it not only has to pass the House, but it has to pass the Senate. And you know, we're getting mixed messages. The Senate's saying one thing, the president says he wants to spend more money than I do. But as I've said before, it's not about the money, it's how the money is spent. You know, we want a child tax credit for the poorest kids in America. They want to retain a tax net operating loss benefit for the wealthiest people in our country. And we're saying, well, you know, how do we reconcile that?
Which was in the CARES Act, right? That was actually in the CARES Act.
And we take it out, and they're insisting on keeping it in. So as I say, it's never, not always just the price, it's the money and how it is spent. So that's.
Quick note, this is what I'm putting together as Nancy Pelosi is talking, so we'll be able to see this. So basically, we've got to hit the terms so far. We'll hit the terms, then the Senate has to pass the House, then the Trump. We know that, but let's get a little bit more detail here on these timeframes.
So anyway, engineering back to have it for Election Day, I would think we'd have to have this finished by the end of next week. In order for that to do it, we'd have to have our legislation all written by the end of this week. then it's, you have all your procedural 72 hours of review for the world to see, and then it would come to the floor, and then the Senate, has different procedures, so it would have to be. But this is really to have it for. Now, I'm not. We could still continue the negotiation. It might not be finished by Election Day.
Right.
It may be finished by Election Day, but I want it by the next Friday. See, I wanted it at a time where people could pay the rent. November 1st, rent day. Let's see if we can't do that. If that's not possible, it doesn't mean that the virus should not still be crushed, that we shouldn't be putting money in the pockets of the American people, that we shouldn't be honoring our heroes. We still should have a responsibility to continue the negotiations should we just not come to enough of an agreement, a reconciliation of our differences. But we're on a path. And you have to be optimistic. As I say, the Secretary and I say to each other, if we didn't believe we could get this done, why would we even be talking to each other?
It's fiendishly complicated and difficult and important.
Just to catch it up right here. So this is what I've got right here as I've written it out. I'll hide myself for a second here. So what we've got is if negotiations end October 20th right here, then election day timeframe would be possible. The legislation would have to be written by Friday, passed by the 30th. The Senate, the House, and Trump would all have to sign that. And then we would have a deal done by the election, which is, of course, November 3rd. All right, I'm not going to play the entire Bloomberg clip here. This is basically the meat of the matter. So we've got our time frame and sort of our schedule here. This is the update we've got from Pelosi here. We've got kind of the big things left. But remember, too, what did we just get her to bend on? And this was really, really impressive. Nancy Pelosi just bent on the census. She bent on the election. She basically told us that, hey, we might just have to fight on that a different day. So we've got some flex on these. And right now, what seems to be left is we already have the OSHA portion of this done. So we just need the consumer portion here on liability protections, and then finalizing the details of this testing plan with balancing out the tax breaks for the rich versus the poor, which I think the reason Nancy Pelosi is bringing this up so much is because those QIP deductions that essentially rich folks got, the qualified investment deductions or property deductions that people got in the CARES Act, poor people didn't see a benefit of that because that was mostly for commercial real estate, bigger buildings and things like that. So I think what Nancy Pelosi's doing is she's holding that hostage and is saying, look, maybe, and I'm going to make a guess here, so this is my opinion, my guess, look, you guys want the tax breaks for the rich, we'll give that to you, but you better give us the tax credits for the poorer Americans, the 99%, right now. And it would not surprise me if that's the way she's handling that negotiation. It certainly makes sense. I think she has decent leverage there. Although, maybe they should have caught it in the CARES Act. Although I will say that tax break that was in the CARES Act, in fairness to Democrats, and I mean, you'd think they'd read it all, but it was actually buried on the bottom half of one page out of the 1,800-page bill. And the New York Times found it 36 hours after the bill passed. Yeah. So that's politics for you. What a crazy world. All right, we'll be on deck to see what Nancy Pelosi has to tell us later in the day. I imagine within the next couple hours we'll get some kind of update, unless it's something depressing, which is just like, well, we're going to talk again tomorrow. But it does sound like we've got good progress here. So that's the update for now. And folks, we'll see you later.